How you doing, guys? Today we're going to talk about the 1056 and what I've done. Not a whole lot, but it has progressed a little bit. It's been so hot and humid that I really didn't feel like working on it a whole heck of a lot. But I did plow through some things to get this project moving because I got to get it done. It's been lingering on a little bit too long. So as you can see, the flywheel's all put together. I put the cooling fins on. This is where the bolts are for the puller. So let's say you wanted to take the flywheel off. There's 3/8-16 threads in here. You'd put your puller bolts in there, and then that would pop the flywheel off. I always thought it looked kind of hokey with them open, so I just got some stainless steel socket head bolts and just put them in the holes. They're not doing anything other than filling the holes. And when you put the grass screen on, it just looks nice and clean. Got socket head bolts right here holding the fins on. Everything's torqued. The main bolt's all torqued. Everything's done with the flywheel. The other thing I did was I put the ignition system on and the air diverter that is supposed to be in a Magnum motor. And let's see here. And then this is the ignition kill wire. I'll show you that in a second. But a little tidbit: in order to set the clearance for these ignition coils, it's pretty simple. You put the coil on and then raise it all the way up to the highest point. Tighten down your bolts. It's just snug. Rotate your flywheel so the magnet is directly underneath it. And then you take this little like a plain, this is an old like price tag type of paper, piece of manila folder will work, or even an old school business card, you know, like just a paper business card. You slip it in between between the flywheel magnet and the coil. You gingerly loosen up both of the bolts, and then the coil will be sucked to the magnet with the paper sandwiched between the two. You tighten down your bolts, and then you just rotate your flywheel either direction. It doesn't make any difference. And what happens is the card will rotate out, and then you can slip it out. Recheck, make sure the bolts are tight, and you're completely set to 20 thousandths. That's what a playing card or a business card or this tag is. It's actually about 20 thousandths. So it gives you the perfect clearance that you need between the flywheel magnet and the ignition coil. Simple, you know, just quick little tip for you. Next thing I did is I have the starter put in. I have to put on a Magnum motor. I'm going to switch over to the other side real quick. You know, in order to put the starter in, you have to put it in the fill tube or the dipstick tube. You actually have to put the starter in first, because once you put that fill tube in place, you can't get the starter out of the bearing plate. It sticks through too much. So that's in. Everything is all bolted down. I used the original bolts from the Magnum motor. I didn't use the bolts that came with the starter. And I just touched them up with some black paint with a brush. Here's your lead. So everything's all set there. One other thing I should have said about the flywheel: the new stator is installed, thus this wire right here. Let me just pull it over. Thus the two wires right here. That goes to the outside poles of your rectifier. The middle pole of the rectifier goes to your ignition switch. And then this is the kill wire that I showed you earlier right here. And essentially what I did was I put a little end on it, have a little bit of heat shrink tubing, and then I brought it in, and right about here, you can see it just barely, I made in this cloth sheath that came with the stator, I made a small little slice, and then I fed the wire through the stator sheath. And the reason for that is I put it behind the starter, so it comes out through here, and I want to use this sheath as like as a cover for all the wiring that needs to go into my electrical box, which I'm going to put right in this area. So I thought that would work out real nice. Basically, this black wire is going to pass right through the electrical box and then into the harness that's going to go up to the dash, because with a 5-pole switch or ignition switch on these kinds of motors, the kill switch for the ignition is just a straight ground. So as soon as you you know, turn it off, it basically goes to ground and kills the ignition. Next thing is, as you can see, I am getting ready to make a new steering column for the tractor. The original one was all rusted and it was just a mess. So I cut the gear off. I don't have it down here yet. I'll show it to you in a second. I cut the gear off and I got a piece of 3/4 inch bar stock. I'm just mocking it up. I have the little plastic bushing that's supposed to be on the underside. That's in there. This is the factory spacer. I'll put the wheel on and then I'll cut the rod where I need it, and then drill for the 3/16 roll pin that goes in there. And then after all that, I will weld or re-weld the steering gear back onto this shaft, or onto this shaft in general. So the steering is coming along. That should be in real good shape. I'm looking forward to that finally. Then I can put the tires on it and then set it back down. The next thing is the battery trays in place. I just painted it. I didn't do anything crazy, and you've seen before how I was going to mount it. I drilled a couple holes through the factory support. I had a couple, they call them elevator bolts, but the flat head bolts, and I welded those to the back of the tray that I made, and then I just contact cemented some rubber. This is actually a tire tube. If you're ever looking for good rubber just for a protection or something like that, just buy a tire tube. I bought 2 maybe 15 years ago, and basically it's a lifetime supply of rubber. So I just cut out a nice little piece of it and contact cemented it right into place, so that way when I drop it in and you force the battery up against those elevator bolt heads, everything will be nice and protected. So another little tip. I use inner tube rubber all the time when I'm looking for a little spacer, or I need a little like rubber gasket, or you know, just anything to that effect. What else do we got? Oh, the cover plate for the shifter arm, or for the high-low selector, that is almost all done. And as you can see, I've cut the hole for the oil temperature gauge. That came out real nice. I dinged it with the hammer right here, so I had to rehammer it flat, and it's a little wavy, so I just put a little filler right there. I'll sand it off real quick, prime it, and it's all set. But I used a hole saw to make that hole, and let's just say the hole saw is no longer with us. It totally, that was a complete disaster. I got real lucky. The hole came out real nice, and the gauge fits super clean in it. And once this thing is painted, it's going to look real sweet in place with the arm through it, and a nice, like I showed you, with a nice slot, and then the gauge will be right there in the middle and perfectly straight. So I was real pleased about that. It was a tough road getting there, but it's done. And here's the gauge. Here's the gauge. I don't know if I showed you the gauge. The gauge is kind of cool. It's an old vintage mechanical oil pressure, or not pressure, sorry, temperature gauge. So that'll go in. But the only thing is, I'm going to be honest with you, it's not going to be the most accurate. And the reason for that is this. This wire, okay, or this cable, is, as you would expect, is literally about 1 inch too short. So basically the distance from here, it has to go down. It's going to go out the hole, like I said, and comes out here, and it's going to go, has to go around this, because when you put this all the way over, it actually touches the frame, or it just about touches right here. So you can't run it underneath. You have to run it around, which meant that I had to make a fitting in order for the probe to even reach the oil. Now the probe's going to be, the end of the probe is going to be right about here, and it's just not going to be accurate. I mean, it'll get over 100 degrees, but it's just not going to be a real accurate, or as accurate as I wish it had been. It was a nightmare trying to make this fitting, because, yeah, Oh, let me go get the other thing right here. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to bang your head on that, but I did. This is the fitting that came with the gauge that is needed to seal the probe end. So, and it has like a little compression style fitting that goes on this, and this like copper end of the probe right there forces up against that internal surface there, and that's what seals it off when you tighten it down. But this is actually really weird. It is actually 5/8 18? I forgot what it was. What is it? 5/8? Let me get it. I got it over here. What I ultimately ended up having to do is I ended up having to buy a tap, which is right here, which is 5/8 18. Let's see if we can get that to focus. There it is. I had to buy a 5/18 tap and a appropriate drill bit which is in here, which is like, I forgot, let me look up on my, let's take a look at the chart. Let's see, it's way up there on top. 5/8 18 is a 37/64 drill bit. So I had to buy a drill bit and I had to buy the tap. So that way I could have the appropriate machine threads in order to tighten the fitting that's required in. I started off with this fitting, which was just basically a hex plug, all right, that I drilled the appropriate size and then tapped the 5/8 18. And this was what I was hoping was this would just screw into the lower section of the oil pan, which it does. The inside, the fitting screws right into that, but that steel sensor was too short. I couldn't get it. I couldn't get it. I would have had to hack a big hole in the hood stand, and then you would have seen it going like coming at a diagonal. It would have looked like really bad. So what I ended up having to do again is go back down to Home Depot. I got a appropriate closed nipple. I got a new, basically a coupling, and then I drilled it out the appropriate size and then re-threaded, or used the tap and threaded the inside so I could screw the fitting into place. And so the probe, which I got right, here's the fitting. So the probe will be able to close down and seal up. And let's see if I can do this with my left hand. Oh yeah, there you go. I mean, it just goes on real nice. And that tightens up right there. I don't think this washer goes there. I just have it there. But so there it is. Then the probe will go right in. I have plenty to come around, go in, and go up to the gauge. But that means the probe is probably only going to go down to about here, which is pretty far away from the hottest point of the oil. Oh well, what are you going to do? Can't win everything. So I worked on that. So that's all set. I just got to finish this plate. Once I finish the plate, I'll put it all together and I'll show you how it all worked out. This is the gear, the lower gear of the steering shaft. Basically, I put it in a lathe and just took a cut-off tool and I cut the weld so this thing could slide right off, and it slid right off, no issues. And it slides right onto the steering shaft that I have in the tractor. So once I take a couple appropriate measurements, I'll just go ahead and weld that onto the shaft, and we should be all set. What else did we pick at? I don't think I did anything else on it. I think that was about it. Oh yeah, the hitch is done. I got that back. It's all powder coated. Everything's all bolted into place. So I'm real happy with that. That came out real nice. This is the tower is all bolted in. It's all set. This is all just loosely affixed, and I'm not using this dash. I have an NOS one that I'm gonna use. That's all red. It's gonna match. It'll look good. The steel wheel spacers are in place. That's all set. So at any moment in time, I can just put the wheels on and off we go. So I'm happy about that. I got to put gear oil in the transmission. I've got to put oil in the motor. Obviously, I have to put the exhaust on. The exhaust is done. My buddy ceramic coated it for me, and it came out, I think, pretty darn nice. I'm going to polish it up a little bit with some mother's polish, and I will be bolting that on probably this weekend because I'm right there and ready to go. The air cleaner and the footrests, I got those back from the powder coater, so we're all set there. They're just waiting to be installed. All the blower tins for the motor are powder coated glossy black, and I'll be putting on those now. And the reason for that is I need to put all the... In one of my other videos, I showed you that the carburetor and the spacer were all bolted on. Obviously, I had to take that off because I wasn't thinking there's a blower tin that goes on right here, and that has to go on first. Then you put the carburetor on. So I pulled it back off, and I'll be putting the blower tins all on pretty soon because I'm right there, and I need to put those on in order to put the carburetor on. I need to put the carburetor on in order to do the governor. So there's a bunch of layers that are coming that are going to move fairly quick. Spark plug's in place. It's a H10, gapped, torqued. It's all done. Oh, what else is... Oh, the other thing I'm coming up is the electric fuel pump's going to go right here. So I'm going to weld a tang onto it so I can bolt it up, make it nice and clean. It'll be up high, so that way when you close the hood, you won't really see it. Kind of like on my 857. Wow. Should be fun. I'm really happy with the way this is coming out. I'm really happy with the fit, maybe not the finish. It looks kind of ratty, but I mean the fit is real nice. It's a tight fit. Everything's really lining up real nice. All right, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you still have interest in the project. I'm going to be moving forward on it. Hopefully this weekend I can work on it a little bit more or give you a little more updates on it because I got to get it done. I want it for the end of the season to at least drive around a little bit to break in the motor. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Thank you very much to all my loyal viewers. I very much appreciate all of your support, and I look forward to talking to you again. Have a nice day. We'll talk to you soon.